Great, so we're back after a drill in the State House building. So we're continuing with our work this morning. And Representative Burke was in the middle of a question, comment. So please.
More of a comment.
Yeah.
Just in terms of, what we heard earlier from the EV people about how we need to coordinate in all these different areas. It's the housing issues of getting the charging, it's not just transportation, it encompasses this. And this too, is thinking about planning policy but also where we put our money and how we find the money or siphon the money off or repurpose or rethink or whatever, how we're going to make these communities that are necessary for our aging population, but also for environmental reasons, for social reasons. It just strikes me that it's a really big, sort of comprehensive picture. We need to think about transportation in that way. And I'm sorry that we don't have a cap and invest program that we were hoping to have that would give us like $20 million to do this. But maybe there's some other options coming down. Anyway, just want to make that comment and appreciate your slides. They're very inspiring.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Representative Burke. This is great to have you here, and we're going to continue with the testimony. And this is, I'm sure there'll be other questions and comments along the way. So I think and we have, since we had we're going to go a little bit beyond 10 o'clock because of the interruption we had. So if we go to 10:15, does that work for you, the group? Okay, great. So take a moment to transition with our.
How does this?
Do you have the
There we go.
side?
There we go.
Okay, good. I know the HDMI cable works not for all devices, so.
Okay, so do I have to join the Zoom to get a?
No, here you go.
There you go. Okay.
So if you could just introduce yourself and welcome.
Thank you all. My name is Rob Kidd. I'm with the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club. For those who aren't familiar with the Vermont chapter of the Sierra Club, we're about 10,000 members and supporters in the state. We're part of the nation's largest and oldest conservation group, and we've been actively promoting electrification of vehicles within the Sierra Club for about the last 15 years. We've been a leader in the National Drive Electric Week program. But then locally in Vermont, we've been actively involved with transportation issues for about 5 years. And the reason why we switched to working on transportation issues and away from a lot of the traditional conservation issues is because 40% of our emissions come from transportation. But also, as I think Katie references, a lot of Vermonters pay more than 15% of their income on transportation. So the only way we're equitably going to address that is if we create solutions that can be accessible to all Vermonters. So my presentation here today is basically going to be around the Transportation for Vermonters Coalition platform. The Sierra Club has a more extensive platform, which I shared with you all in another document on Friday. I emailed you all, but I just don't want to be confusing. I'm speaking on behalf of Transportation for Vermonters today, but I can answer some questions on that. So first off, the major focus with Transportation for Vermonters around vehicle electrification is reducing its barriers. That is basically the biggest problem. Access to the cost of electric vehicles right now are currently much higher. So the incentives are very helpful. Also the access to charging. Now I want to comment about that because there's a lot of information going around charging the access. Most charging occurs at one's home. So about, I think 85 to 90% occurs at one home, but it's a lot of those people who are lower income who can't access charging. For years I lived in a rental apartment that I couldn't just install a charger, even though Green Mountain Power's like, here's a charger, free charger. I couldn't access a charger. So we have to think about that. We've done a lot of great work around multi-unit dwellings, workplace charging, and finding community traction. So there's a lot of room that you all directed the agency to do, and the agency has been doing, but we encourage you more of that. I want to also just continue. I'm not even going to read the slides because I know we're tight for time, but I want to recap last year in the 2022 transportation bill. You included a lot of money for EVs. It was actually clarified. It's also in the general, the big bill, not just the transportation bill, but it's what all you agreed upon who was on this committee. So thank you all for supporting that. But, you know, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, a few of us came in here asking for $3 million for incentives for EVs. And kind of the common cause was like, no, we can't do that. We can't afford that. And I think I'm very appreciative that the evolution of this committee, the way you're responding to transportation issues, the way you're looking at it, because, you know, to remind you on this, 40% of our emissions come from transportation. But also to remind you, another component is it's really good for our economy to switch to vehicle electrification, as this is a stat that a lot of people do not remember, is when you purchase gasoline, 85 cents of every dollar leaves the state of Vermont, just leaves our economy. And the flip side, if you electrify, 65 cents of every dollar stays within Vermont. So it's like it keeps that money circulating, creates jobs, because we have to also upgrade the electrical lines, you know, and we're doing more power generation here locally, so it keeps a lot of the money into the economy. So it's just not a program that's going to help the wealthy, as a lot of people talk about. It keeps our economy growing a little bit more. I also want to acknowledge the great work you all done in creating the Mileage Smart and Replace Your Ride program. You know, and like you see last year, $3 million for each program. I know the Replace Your Ride program hasn't been successfully implemented yet, but I think it's kind of its infancy. So we encourage you to keep those funds there, because we want to make sure we're helping the lower income Vermonters be able to still access these vehicles. So I just want to remind that. Then also e-bike incentives. Last year was $50,000 you authorized. It was the year before it was $50,000. And I know you all agreed with the Budget Adjustment Act to move that forward again this year. For $100,000. We hope, after hearing more testimonies from like folks of Local Motion in the vital communities about e-bikes, that they are a viable mix and a part of our solution. You know, Dave Cohen, from Brattleboro area, is very knowledgeable on these issues. So we hope you continue that particular program. And then I also want to acknowledge your program support of Drive Electric Vermont. I think that is very critical for us to continue supporting the marketing around that, because as Representative Shaw, you referenced a couple of weeks ago, is that the average Vermonter doesn't know about these issues. They don't understand it. And it's something I've worked on within my work at the Sierra Club. We've done National Drive Electric Week events with Drive Electric Vermont, a whole line of other partners, and trying to educate people. But you know, we advertise and promote these, we get the people who are interested in electric vehicles. The common public is still not coming out, because they still have this image of an electric vehicle being this weak vehicle that you can't go far, has no power. My Kia Niro that I have now, also I was driving it when I'm testing it, also I looked down, going 100 miles an hour. I didn't even realize it. So I actually put a setting on it to prevent me from going anywhere over 80, because it's so easy to drive fast. These vehicles are much more powerful, and they're not weak as the imagery that people have. So I just want to say those programs like that, educating Vermonters. Even the governor with his F-150 is great. It's teaching people about the realities of electrification. And the governor has been supportive of making proclamations supporting electrification. So I just recognize all that particular work. As I talked about, the EV charging infrastructure is very critical to get at, especially, you know, we have all the money from the federal government coming in around the corridors, which is going to be getting the people coming into the state of Vermont against most of our charging. But still, there's a lot of Vermonters who have to travel further for work, so we need to make sure we still have access to that. But I also want to just highlight in my category C there, the authorizing $10,000 for multi-unit dwellings and workplaces. And a lot of people haven't really understand why it's essential for workplaces. A lot of people who work in Vermonters, most of the place they spend their whole day is at work. What better place to have access to the charger? If they can't install a charger at their home, because they're renting or it's just inconvenient. Having access to charging at a workplace is very essential, and that's something I want you all to consider about how we can help and support that. And then there's also last year in the transportation bill was about expanding the state vehicle fleet, and I think that's something we all need to consider because again, it goes well with the transportation of Vermonters. We're removing barriers. It's getting people to more accustomed to seeing electric vehicles, that they're viable. If state employees are home with their electric vehicles or driving into meetings, they're getting accustomed to driving them. It's not just a theory out there, and that's what we need to get at. I want to acknowledge on here is Vermont joined the Advanced Clean Cars 2 and Advanced Clean Trucks program. That, I think, is one of the most critical programs that we're implementing. For those who were here during the global warming solutions debate, that basically came out of that and the climate action plan saying Vermont needs to move forward with those and following the rules of California. And knowledge is basically what that is making sure is Vermonters have access to these vehicles and we're not just limited in supply, because basically the way the marketplace is, they push the vehicles off to where there's the demand, and we're making sure that those cars that are going to be sold in Vermont are electric vehicles, and we're going to ratchet up our supply of those. Now, also to make it, I think the average lifespan of a car in Vermont is 11 years, and so the more we electrify now, getting electric vehicles out in there, the more used vehicles for those who can't afford the new ones come out in the place. Right now, there's a very weak supply of used electric vehicles. My vehicle I bought was a used one, and but it's very limited because there's not that many out there, and that programs like that will help create the new marketplace and get out new vehicles on older and used vehicles that can help lower income Vermonters along the way. I want to also acknowledge within the Advanced Clean Car rules, there's a provision in there about cleaning up the batteries and making batteries be recycled. So they're going to actually label the batteries. So that way, when the car's usefulness is over, they can actually literally pull that battery out and see, okay, it has cobalt on it, it has lithium. And they can know and separate those materials because those materials are quite valuable and they're going to be able to reuse them. They don't use effectiveness with compared to you burn your gasoline. The minerals used for the batteries are reusable and not just something that we can waste. So that's a lot of work, a lot of innovation, including in the Inflation Reduction Act. There's also provision incentivizing the recycling of batteries so we actually have enough of supply. So there's always a lot of concern whether we're going to have enough minerals. What do we do with the waste? Those are legitimate concerns, but there are efforts to rectify those matters. So I just want to let you know is I followed all those hearings. I only missed two of the hearings in person when they did that, and I would say 90% of Vermonters supported the adoption of the rules in those hearings. Now there were people had the questions, like I said, but the agency of Transportation, Department of Public Service, and the Agency of Natural Resources had very good, thoughtful responses. So if you're interested, read that report and their public comments. So when I'm talking, we think we almost have everything solved. We don't have everything solved. We have a lot more work to do, but I'm appreciative to all the work this body has done to increase vehicle electrification. So I just kind of gave some quick little updates on next steps that we need to do. Continue funding the e-bike incentives, particularly in the Budget Adjustment Act and the Transportation Bill. Ensure that the Mileage Smart program, Replace Your Ride program, and the EV incentive funds are distributed and adequately marketed. I also would like to see more transparency so that we can go with on this. And then also we include, incentive programs, make sure car share is included, and that we also have, we take a look at the long-term comprehensive funding solutions for all these problems out there, not just targeting electric vehicles. Let's look at how we can pay for all these programs down the road. So That's basically the short end of my testimony. I can talk more about any of these issues in more detail, and any of you, if you see me around, obviously you do, I can answer any questions further, so.
Well, thank you, Rob, for being here. And we know that you follow the work of this committee closely, so thank you for being here. And I think just in the interest of time, we might just move to the next presentation, if that's just so to give everybody in the coalition a chance. I'm looking at Katie. So I think, and then we can maybe take questions at the end. So Clayton Clark, are you up next? Great. Thanks for joining us today. We'll do our committee rooms are small and we have to do a little dance steps to move around each other.
Part of the charm.
Yeah. Great. Well, welcome back, Clayton.
Thank you. So I'm Clayton Clark. I'm the general manager of Green Mountain Transit. And as Christina mentioned, I'm in my 6th week there. And one of the things that I have loved about coming to work for GMT is seeing something that you already know, which is how interconnected transportation is to just about everything that is a human activity in the state. And one of the things that I like with our Transportation for Vermont Coalition is that you can see how we have folks who are working on a micro level in their communities, all the way to folks who are working on statewide actions. And the common thing is transportation, whether they're focused on climate, whether they're focused on equity, and one of the solutions, or one of the ways to get to these goals, is to encourage people to use the public transit system that we have here. And so that's where zero fare comes in. And so as you've heard when I was here last time, there's a question about zero fare when it comes to our urban area. But really I want to talk first about the success that zero fare has had throughout Vermont. And there's a reason why zero fare is supported broadly in the state, and that is because it has helped us improve our ridership coming out of the pandemic. And so there's no doubt in my mind that when we saw the crashing levels of ridership that happened because of the pandemic, that our return, and we're not fully returned yet to pre-pandemic levels, but the rapid rate of a return at least has partially been because of zero fares. And I think that one of the things that we need to keep in mind for these goals to work, we need to change behavior. And even if it's only $1.50 for a route, a financial barrier does change human behavior. And so that's why Green Mountain Transit, that's why Transportation for Vermont is supportive of the concept of zero fare. I can tell you that when you look at who uses public transportation in Vermont, and I'll speak only from GMT's area, primarily the folks that are using the transportation are folks that need to use it. We know from our demographics that our ridership tends to be folks who are on the lower income spectrum, and so to get them where they need in a way that is good for our environment, good for social justice, we need to look at zero fare. Fortunately, the mechanics, or I shouldn't say the mechanics, the cost effectiveness of zero fare is not in question in our rural zones. It is in question in our urban zones, and so I do want to just take a moment to talk a little bit about the continued zero fare discussion about whether urban bus routes in Vermont should have a fare or not.
And Clayton, I'm going to interject a little bit because I know this is a big topic that
Yes.
we've been talking about with you. So I want to be respectful also of the other folks who are.
Absolutely.
So I know we're going to have a deeper discussion.
Excellent.
You've been you were in
Yes.
testimony. We had Ross McDonald in here on Friday.
Yes.
So if you, I want to be able to give a full I know we're going to have you probably, I'm anticipating
Then
that.
I will wait. And that
Is that possible? I don't want that to be
No.
perceived as me cutting you off, but I know it warrants probably more than 10 minutes.
yes.
If you want to give the high level, that would be.
I just wanted to highlight that there is one bit of information that Ross provided that is incomplete.
Okay.
And that is that although it's accurate that 100% of the funds that we receive from VTrans is not based on ridership, we are unique in Vermont that we have GMT has a direct Federal Transit Administration direct apportionment. And those funds are driven by ridership levels. And so there is a risk in reduced ridership that we will have significantly less federal dollars. And that's the only point that I wanted to make to you all today. And you will have additional written testimony from me by hopefully the end of this week, and then certainly come back to talk to you all afterwards.
Okay, and I just appreciate, I know that you are all going to be, having discussions and bringing a few proposals back to us.
Yes.
And appreciate your work on that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much.
Peter, who is joining us via Zoom, I believe, is that, if I have the order correctly? Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. I am here.
Welcome. Welcome to the committee. Isn't Zoom a great thing that you can be here with us in this way?
Yes, and I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but so thank you for the opportunity to give you a public transit user's perspective. I'm Peter Johnke. I'm the Deputy Director of the Vermont Center for Independent Living. As a transportation advocate, and as you know, VCIL is also a member of the coalition. I also serve on the statewide Public Transit Advisory Council, as well as some regional and state councils, and also on some national councils, all focused on public transportation. And I'm a carless traveler. For those of us who are carless travelers, either because we can't drive, such as myself, or too poor to own a car, or maybe somebody who's really making a conscious effort to reduce greenhouse gases and chooses not to have a car. But whichever, the more options we have, the better chances are we're going to get where we want to go when we want to get there. So my commute kind of looks like this. In the mornings, I connect with my neighbor, who I ride share with, drops me off at Wayside Restaurant. I wait about 15 minutes and I connect with the Montpelier commuter and get to the transit center and walk the last third of a mile to my office and essentially do the reverse going home. And it's great. I mean, in reality, it doesn't work that way every day, but most days. But if I want to do something spontaneously, forget it. It's just not possible. A bunch of coworkers want to go out for a drink after work. Yeah, I can't go. I don't have a way to get home. So it's really crucial to increase as many options as possible to make all these different connections. I mean, Vermont does a great job. We spend more money per capita on rural transportation than any other place does. And I've figured out a lot of this transportation stuff from being here over 30 years and just working through it. And one of the things that I don't think people know is, especially for people who maybe lower income or don't have as many connections socially, it's not as easy to ask people for a ride as you might think. It's actually a skill you have to learn. I had to learn it. You have to kind of know you have to ask a lot of people and you have to be okay with it. Sorry, I can't help you, and just take that in stride. I was actually in Washington, Seattle, Washington, many years ago for a transportation conference. Was introduced to another person from Vermont and discovered they lived 10 minutes away from me at that time. And then we started ride sharing. So now whoever I meet new, I always ask them where they live, because you never know where those connections are going to be. But it's really crucial that we have creative programs, different programs, even educational programs, to try to connect people to the different modes of transportation. If I tried to do my commute with just one mode of transportation, it would be practically impossible. So it's really important that all the public transit gets connected. So the intermodal connections are all there, that we educate people about community rides and how to do kinds of things. I was really disappointed at the end of, actually officially as of December 1st, the Hitching Post Vermont program ceased operation. And that's disappointing because the East Calais General Store is about to reopen. The East Calais Community Trust is reopening it. And it would have been a perfect location for a Hitching Post location. And again, that would have been another option to get to work. Sometimes my neighbor doesn't go in, and so I have to find a different avenue. And there's been a lot of talk about microtransit, and I like microtransit. I use it, but we've learned it's one option, and we've learned a lot from the pilot that's been going on in Montpelier. And an important lesson we learned is that it doesn't work for everybody. There are people who simply need a schedule. With a fixed route, you don't have to think, you don't have to plan. You just stand at a bus stop and a bus comes. And for people with certain disabilities, especially with chronic fatigue or chronic pain, variations of 10 or 15 minutes can really make a trip unbearable. So in those situations, even microtransit doesn't work very well. I have an option when my commute to ride my bike, which I do in the summertime. And I use my bike essentially for commuting, rarely for recreation. So I leave my house and go to the East Calais post office, catch the bus, put the bike on the bike rack. Probably need some adjustments to bike racks as we move forward so they can accommodate fat bikes and different bikes. Little tricky lifting a 50-pound bike onto the bike rack, but it works. And then that actually takes me right downtown. I get off across the street from my office. Very efficient. It's a great option for me for commuting. So I always look for as many options as I can, even if they don't work all the time of the year. It's just important to have more of them. So I'm looking forward to finding out how microtransit is going to work in the other pilot projects that are seen. But we have to recognize it's not just one thing. I mean, I've learned over the years with time and enough time in planning, I can get just about anywhere I need to go, even though I don't own a car. And the Go Vermont program has been very successful. They've made a lot of improvements, some specifically at my suggestions, to make it a little more user-friendly. You can connect to get better for rideshare programs or carpool programs. But as I said before, my experience has been you've got to ask people, where do you live? How do you go there? So, my dream would be if you want to have some sort of vetting of people, maybe simply people who are registered with Go Vermont, if they chose, they could have an app. People who, like myself, who need rides could have an app. And so I can put in my app, here's where I need to go. When drivers driving around, if they have an extra space, they can see, oh, hey, I'm not too far from him. He's registered on Go Vermont. Hey, I can give him a ride. I mean, to me, that would really be my ride. So I know we're a little short of time, so I'm going to end there. But I thank you very much for letting me share my experiences with you. And any questions, we'll answer them.
Great. Well, thank you, Peter, for joining us this morning. And it's so important for us to hear about people's experience as they're using our transportation system. And we've been hearing, I think it was EAN did a report and kind of echoed many of the things that you're saying about, transportation for work is great, but also for people to fully participate in our communities and just participate in living. That it needs to go beyond that essential. So I really feel like your testimony kind of reinforces a lot of that, the report that we got there. So I just want to be able to move on. And then I know there might be some more questions and comments from the committee. So Sophia, come and join us. Welcome to the House Transportation Committee.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us today. My name is Sophia Donforth, and I'm the director of the Vermont Energy Education Program. We support teachers across the state in teaching about energy use and climate change, and we work with youth not just to understand how our energy use impacts the climate, but also on how our choices make a difference. So I supervise a team of folks who take posters like this into classrooms on a regular basis. This shows the emissions impact of a kid walking to school compared with being driven there by a parent in an SUV. And on the other side, the energy impact of that same kid walking versus being driven. And the kids look at this and they say, oh my goodness, what am I doing? And then they get upset. And then we talk about choices. And the difference between that same kid being driven by themselves versus carpooling is huge. And even if you live in a place that doesn't have a bus system, there are options. That's a whole lot of what we're trying to bring to the table. But the very next thing that those kids say is, there are so few options. So because young people are in school at this time of day, I'm here instead to share what Veep has learned from working with students across the K-12 spectrum on transportation issues in their communities. And I will leave some of those posters behind if people want to peruse them later.
That'd be great.
Here are some of the important takeaways that we've heard from young folks. Alternatives to cars need to be easy, accessible, affordable, and reliable, or people aren't going to use them. 2, we need safe routes to school. No one's going to walk or bike if there isn't a safe way to do it. And many of us will need to make walking or biking part of our commute if we're going to share rides either by car or by bus. 3, electric vehicles are an important part of greener transportation in our very rural state, but they aren't a solution for everyone. If you're too young to drive, or you have health conditions that preclude it, or if EVs are still too expensive, even with the incentives, you still deserve to get around as safely and as independently as possible. We need solutions besides just EVs. And 4th, we need buses that run more often and later in the day that connect us to the places where we need to go. Bus routes keep shutting down because of low ridership, but few people can ride the bus because it's difficult to use or limited in where it goes. And so we're hearing that from kids, young kids, old kids, all the way across the spectrum. I think it's important to cite data. Vermont After School recently put out a report from the State Youth Advisory Group on Universal After School, which noted that lack of adequate transportation is the #1 barrier to youth accessing after-school programming. These programs are critical for keeping youth safe, for inspiring learning, and for supporting working families, and youth are self-reporting that transportation is the largest barrier to their participation. We at Veep know that young people need more transportation options because of how we work with them. We run the Youth Climate Leadership Academy each year, which supports teams of high schoolers in completing a project to increase energy efficiency and climate resilience in their school. We talk about where they can have the most impact or leverage. And while they're quick to grasp that the largest sources of carbon emissions are often transportation, few projects wind up tackling that at their schools because there are so few options in their towns. If there isn't a local transit system to plug into, they're kind of out of luck. So I think this is an area where we could harness youth energy if we had state investment in a more robust and equitable transportation system. Another part of increasing people's use of our options is education. Veep is currently building a travel training program to help young folks become confident bus riders, but we're already running into challenges as we look for schools and transit systems where we can pilot it. With the growing shift away from fixed routes that Peter was just mentioning to an on-demand system, we're seeing equity issues. A bus system that requires an app and therefore a smartphone is not truly accessible. And with the likely return of fares on public transit this summer, we need to think about whether students have the technology they need to make payments, because some of them don't take cash. So Veep is working to train youth to be comfortable on public transit and increase demand for those routes, but we need to make sure that there's a good transit system for them to tap into. And I will just quickly close because I know we're running on time, but I am a parent of 2 small children and I have firsthand experience of the difficulty of getting them where they need to go. My kids are 8 and 4. The 8-year-old, because we live in Burlington, can walk 2 blocks to her school. The 4-year-old, we ride to school, to preschool on a bicycle during the months where that is possible. But at this time of year, that's not. The roads are too narrow because of the snow piles on either side and too slippery for our bike. Despite a bus stop being 2 blocks from our home, we can't rely on it to get our child to preschool in time and my husband to his job in time to start teaching at 8:30. And so I work from home and I drive them up the hill and back. That is a trip that doesn't need to happen. But I have that alternative and not everybody does. right? Missing preschool pickup isn't an option. Being late for work isn't an option. Holding down a job and parenting a small child requires reliable transportation. And we don't have a system that's sufficient for that, even in downtown Burlington. So I will just leave you with this thought. It's an increase in the quality of life for everybody if we have a multitude of options that work together that are available for the 8-year-old walking herself to 3rd grade and the 80-year-old who's not comfortable driving anymore. And I would just urge you to please start thinking of transportation as a matter of both climate responsibility and equity, because we need it to be easy for everybody to be able to do it well. Thank you.
And it looks as if you have written testimony, and if you could send them, it'd be great for us, we can post it on our committee webpage.
Absolutely. And I can send you a PDF of this poster along with it.
You can stay right, if you don't need to.
Okay.
It's okay, yeah, but we have a few minutes if the committee has further questions or comments, but before we do that, I just want to thank you for coming in today, and thank you for, making not just our committee, but the legislature aware of some of these, the importance of some of these issues. And I mean, it's a really impressive coalition of organizations, and appreciate the work that you're doing around equity and accessibility and, innovations to bring some of these solutions to our communities. So thank you very much. Representative Dodge.
And I really thank you too. I wanted to add that it's sort of a virtuous cycle also, that issues of equity also develop our economy, right? And so when we talk about transforming our economy or transforming, lowering gas emissions, we are talking about new investments and new job growth and the ability for after-school programs, which is going to, mean a safer environment for kids who will then require less one-on-one care because of acting out or because of, a lot of these things that are costing our state a lot. So thank you so much.
Representative Burke.
So how do you get yourselves into schools, and how do you operate? How do you deploy your information?
We do a lot of cold calling and cold emailing. And then once we have a teacher in the building who is interested in these programs, it gets a lot easier.
Yeah.
And that's one of the strengths of the Youth Climate Leaders Academy, is that the high schoolers are often even more eager than the adults to make changes right where they are. And so that's part of developing that program as well.
Representative Couch, and then Representative Lally and Bartholomew.
Thank you. I'm curious I'll look at your poster, but I assume, you've got individuals being driven to school or walking to school. So somewhere in there is the school bus. And I wonder where that data came, because it's really how many people are riding the school bus. And, what difficulties maybe students and or parents say about, I'm going to just drive the kids versus allow them to take the bus. What are the reasons that comes up?
Yeah, so partway down the poster, it shows the difference between a diesel bus at 10 student capacity versus 20 student capacity, right? So how full the bus is, and also for an electric bus. And so again, students saying, we don't have e-buses in my district. Well, fine, fill your diesel bus. That's still a great way to do it, right? We hear a lot about length of drive. We hear a lot about where the bus stop is and how hard it is to get there. And if I have to drive my kid to the bus stop anyway, why don't I just drive them the rest of the way? I think those are the two things we're hearing most frequently. And then the after school piece, if there are extracurriculars involved, and whether that bus runs again later.
Thank you.
So, did you want to answer that question too, Rob?
Yeah, I wanted to add something related towards the emission stuff. The legislature passed an anti-idling law many years ago, but if you still go to a lot of schools, you'll see parents sitting there with their vehicles idling, even here in Montpelier. You go up to the elementary school, their cars are idling, and there's a lot of people don't understand that law. So I just want to acknowledge that you did pass something to impact that, but it's not really easily enforced.
Representative Burke had something to do with that. So I think we had Representative Lally and then Representative Bartholomew.
Yeah, I was wondering if you work with schools that are maybe trying to get a safe routes to school program started, or to help get that off the ground. I love the idea of, we have a K through 8 in our town, of getting the middle schoolers involved in the leadership of this and how that could translate to, when they go to the Union High School, but also to get their parents to see, we have a big problem in my town where people are driving their kids to school. And I just learned that we're about to consider doing some pretty major impacts to an intersection that I'm distressed to learn about because of the traffic impacts that this is having. So I think helping people understand, how all of this fits together and getting the kids involved would be amazing. I'm remembering my childhood in the early 70s and the Clean Water Act going through and how that led to a whole generation of kids basically pestering their parents, which led to voting and so forth. So we can do it again.
Yeah, we're definitely supporting Safe Routes to School. We work closely with Local Motion and a number of schools across the state, and it really is just about finding both students and teachers that are interested in that work. But we've definitely met with success where kids were excited to do some sort of demonstration in their town. I'm looking over here.
I can just add that, so we Local Motion currently works with our Safe Routes to School program. We're kind of the holder of that program for the state in partnership with VTrans, and currently are in approximately 80 or 90 schools throughout the district, throughout the state. And so there's opportunities to expand that with appropriate scaling for funding and more staffing on that. So down the road, you might hear an ask for more of that, so that we would love to see every school be able to participate in this, so that all children and families are able to get to and from school in other modes.
Thank you. Thank you. I think Representative Bartholomew?
Are we opening questions to all our witnesses, or?
Yes, I think so. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Peter who mentioned Uber-like app for getting rides.
Can you hear that, Peter?
And I'm just curious about any thoughts anyone might have about dealing with personal security and safety issues where you're picking up someone you don't know or getting a ride with someone you don't know. I mean, it seems like a great idea. I'm really intrigued, but there are some safety issues that might come up.
Yeah, I agree. This is Peter, and I'll try to address that. And that's why I mentioned, there's no formal vetting process when you register at Go Vermont, but maybe that could be enhanced a little bit for people who choose to, get in a new program. And that's what I was talking about, funding for all these creative projects, pilots, to try to figure this stuff out. So that it is important, I agree, that you have this connection and there's, some way, that, oh yeah, okay, this person's in this system and, somebody knows who they are. And so you can feel safer with that kind of an option. We don't have, maybe in Burlington and Rutland and ski season, there's, Lyft and Uber and those kinds of things. And, obviously the drivers have some kind of vetting through those companies, but I don't know if people ultimately would, especially with children, would feel safe in those scenarios. But I agree, it's something we need to explore. It's something we need to find creative ways to deal with.
It's a good point. I remember, I know that with not the Go Vermont app, but with volunteers that are giving rides, they have to go. We heard from Ross McDonald that there's some vetting. I'm saying that nods from in the room that there's a vetting process. But that's, I think, Representative Bartholomew, your point is well taken about the Go Vermont app. So that's definitely something to think about. I think we could have time for one. Did I see any questions on the side of the room? Okay, don't want to make sure all inclusive here. So wonderful. I think thank you so much for being with us this morning. And this was wonderful. Are you sticking around in the cafeteria longer, or is your
We're actually about to head outside to do a vehicle emissions demonstration project next to the emission specs. We're going to go have my husband's car fill up a big bag with exhaust.
Okay, all right, well, that's, how the fun continues, so, great.
Interest.
Yeah,
We borrowed the lieutenant governor's parking spot.
okay, there you
Close
go.
enough so you don't have to go that far if you
So, okay,
exhaust.
great, well,
Just how long it takes to fill a 12-foot plastic sleeve. It's very impressive.
okay. Well, we're about to have a committee break, so maybe, people could, great, well, thank you again for coming. And to the committee, we'll take a break, now,